Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight, 4 lives remembered during the 2019 Labor Day parade. Frederick McAlpine rips into the government's budget. 1,000 cars coming in from Japan per month, plus an increase in firearm certificates being issued.
Our News is brought to you by Alive.
Welcome to Our News and thanks for joining us. I'm Kyle Joaquin. Topping news tonight, hundreds of supporters of the country's labor movement took to the streets for the 2019 Labor Day parade. But the normally upbeat event took on a much somber tone as they honored the fallen 4 who died during last year's parade. Jasmine Brown has more.
It was a very somber parade, as those who've walked it many times said the mood was definitely different, but the celebrations were the same. From the music to the mood, today's parade was filled with tears, hugs, and stoic stares as they reflected on last year's tragedy. Last year, 4 people were killed and 24 injured during the 2018 Labor Day parade when a runaway truck struck a group of participants. Police said the accident took place near the E Street and Shirley Street intersection. Eyewitnesses said the truck rolled down the street, hitting multiple people as it picked up speed. Tabitha Charlene Bethel Hay, Tammy Patrice Williams Gibson, Diane Elizabeth Gray Ferguson, and Kathleen Augusta Rogers Fernander were all killed. The women were remembered during an emotional wreath-laying ceremony just feet away from where they took their last breaths. The family members of Tammy Williams Gibson were on hand for the event, saying they planned on finishing the parade, something Tammy never got the chance to do.
I'm going to just finish the march that Tammy didn't get to finish last year. I'll finish it for her. It is hard, but I'm willing to do it. It's hard, but I'm willing to do it.
A somber moment, and right now I think I'm still on the unbelief that my sister's actually gone, but I appreciate everything that's being done to recognize the women who would have lost their lives.
And like their families, leaders of several of the country's top unions and the labor minister also paid their respects to the fallen 4, while also reflecting on how their deaths forever changed the parade.
Come today to celebrate workers, and this is the first time we celebrate Labor Day in such a somber fashion.
And they have actually changed. I think the mood and the modus operandi of a Labor Day parade going forward.
So for us to participate in this, it's kind of a fulfillment, a closure for the movement as a whole, and just for us as a whole to recognize that some things happen, and now we're paying respect to the persons who would have lost their lives.
It's certainly a lasting mark on the labor movement and the way we celebrate Labor Day.
I'd like to compliment both of the umbrella groups for coming together and devoting this whole week to our 4 fallen sisters. We know that they're resting in peace, and we continue to pray for their families. We also want to remember the 20 or plus persons who were injured. We also remember them, and we hope that their scars will eventually heal.
In the weeks leading up to the parade, it was announced that vehicles will not be allowed between workers during the 2019 parade. That change was evident in today's parade, as there were no vehicles to be seen amongst the hundreds of union members. Reporting for Our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
All right, thanks, Jasmine. Well, former Grand Bahama Minister and PLP Senator Michael Darville is speaking out on behalf of the unions in Grand Bahama. He says he feels that although the Minnis administration may be only 2 years into its term, more could have been done on the labor front on that island.
Last week at a press conference in Grand Bahama, the Coalition of Grand Bahama Unions spoke on several issues, including the increase of the casual workforce on the island. Vice President of the Bahamas Hotel Managerial Union, Kirkland Russell, said that the union has assembled an 8-page document addressed to the Minister of Labor listing several outstanding concerns. Former Grand Bahama Minister and Opposition Senator Dr. Michael Darville joined with the unions calling on the current administration to no longer ignore the cries of workers on that island.
In Grand Bahama, over the last 2 years, the workforce has been severely affected, particularly in the tourism sector, as the government tried to revive the tourism sector on the island of Grand Bahama.
Darville said the government's purchase of the Grand Lucayan Resort and subsequent pending sale, he strongly hopes that the government promise to provide employment does not include casual workers and puts those persons at a disadvantage.
With the purchasing of the hotels and the packages that were put in place for many of the employees, the tourism sector has been affected. And so as the tourism sector begins to pick up and as the hotel go into a season where there are individuals who are expressing interest to come to Grand Bahama, a lot of casual workers are being called back to the hotel to fill this void. This is of concern to us because, as you are aware, casual workers don't have benefits. And so the union is absolutely right, and they must sit with the government, who is now the owner of the hotel and who is responsible for the workforce, to ensure that this problem is addressed and addressed immediately.
Darville said he will continue to work with the union representatives until they get an answer to this issue.
As the visitors start to come back to Grand Bahama, to replace the workforce that receive packages, not bring in casual workers as the tourism sector peaks and drops, but we need to make sure that these people are well taken care of and they're properly funded and they have permanent jobs so that they can access financing and they can go ahead and have access to mortgages, car loans, travel, as well as even education. And that is not possible for casual workers in the country.
Union leaders are scheduled to meet with the Minister of Labor on Thursday. Reporting for our news, I'm Georgia Bain.
In other news, Pineridge MP Frederick McAlpine ripped into the government's budget last night, saying it doesn't do much for the common man. McAlpine, during his contribution, said the Free National Movement appears to be doing everything it said it wouldn't do while on the campaign trail, from the increase in value-added tax to remaining transparent with its decisions. One of those decisions he mentioned, that of the relocation of the General Post Office to Town Center Mall.
You could fool some of the people some of the time, but you won't fool all the people all the time. We could sit up in here and say it's not a conflict of interest, but to most Bahamians, they perceive it to be so. It's not what we said, it's what we did.
During his contribution, McAlpine got into numerous heated back and forths with members of his own party, including St. Anne's MP Brent Simonet. McAlpine also raised an issue with the lack of reporting on how much money government spends sending various delegations around the world.
The other day in the House of Commons, persons, I got to say that, had to get that out of my system, because I'm well traveled, and I don't have to say I've traveled on the people's money and the people's dime, and the people are still waiting for a report, because many people still seem to be traveling in numbers and going to far-flung places at your expense, eating, sleeping, drinking, working. So they say.
Well, PLP Chairman Fred Mitchell is raising several questions surrounding the 2019-2020 budget. He says the most vulnerable of our society are suffering from budget cuts to the Department of Social Services.
My office in Fox Hill sits on top of the Department of Social Services, so I get all the complaints. I get the complaints about the slashing of the monies. I get the complaints about people not being treated properly when they come to get service. I get the complaints that the money is simply not enough. And so I see the pain on people's faces when they come, the indignity of having to deal with it. So I feel very deeply for people who are in this position.
Mitchell suggested that if the PLP wins the next general election, taxes will be rolled back in an effort to lift the burdens on residents and business owners.
We are still seeing the knock-on effects of raising this VAT tax. And I'm really at the point where as a public figure, I want to recommend to the PLP that they roll back the taxes. Now, of course, we have to see what the facts are on the ground, but I think you have to think in terms of that, because the knock-on effects of what has happened is still being felt through the economy. And what people are doing is cutting back, cutting back, cutting back. Some people are going out of business as a result of it because the spending is so severely crimped.
According to the Bureau of Standards and Quality, there are 1,000 cars being brought in from Japan per month. And Bureau Director Dr. Renee Buford told our news recently that the number would be higher if it weren't for the recent restrictions government put in place.
So far, we have had, on an average, about 1,000 vehicles that are coming in on a monthly basis. And it's adding great advantage to the country because we're also receiving some revenue from that that's coming back to the country.
Back in January, the Bahamas became the second country in the region embracing pre-shipment inspection, where $150 is paid for inspection in Japan. This inspection would test for roadworthiness of all vehicles from Japan before they are shipped to the Bahamas. Of that $150, the Bureau of Standards gets $20.
I will say that we started the beginning of this year with the pre-inspection of conformity to those imported vehicles that are coming into the country from Japan, from Singapore, from the UK and Dubai. And so far we can tell you that we've had 100% compliance with those cars that are coming in, and those that are not being complied, they are being retested before they come back in and ensure that they comply to the standard.
Still to come, we now know the identity of the two bodies recovered from Wednesday's fire on Grand Bahama. Plus, there's an increase in firearm certificates being handed out. Stay tuned.